Kayla's boots sank slightly into the soft, glowing moss as she moved carefully between the towering alien trees. Each trunk was wider than a building on Earth, and their leaves shimmered in colors she had never seen before: deep purple, fiery orange, and a faint silver that reflected the dim light of the twin moons. Strange sounds filled the forest. Some were low growls, almost like whispers, and others were sharp clicks that echoed from somewhere far above. Kayla's pulse quickened. She had been trained for situations like this, but nothing had prepared her for the weight of the forest pressing down on her from all sides. Every shadow seemed alive, and she had to remind herself to breathe calmly. Her mission was simple in theory: observe the wild predators that lived on this planet and report her findings back to the research station. In practice, it was terrifying. The creatures she was studying were known for their sharp teeth, deadly claws, and lightning-fast reflexes. Scientists on her home planet had barely glimpsed them through remote sensors. Nobody had ever approached one in person and lived to tell the story. Kayla had volunteered anyway. She was determined to prove that humans could survive and adapt even in the most dangerous environments. A faint whine broke her focus. She froze, straining her ears to pinpoint the sound. It was small, fragile, and filled with fear. Kayla's heart thudded as she moved toward the noise, careful not to make a sound. She spotted movement ahead, a flicker of dark shapes darting through the underbrush. She crouched low, pressing herself against the glowing moss, and saw a dozen tiny predator cubs huddled together. Their fur was mottled with black and silver, and their eyes shone with a strange mix of curiosity and terror. They were no bigger than her forearm, but already, they had the sharpness of their species in their tiny claws and teeth. Kayla held her breath. She had been warned about adult predators, but these were children, vulnerable, scared, and lost. She looked around, hoping to see their mother, but the shadows remained empty. The cubs were trembling and their ears flicked nervously at every sound. Kayla knew she had to act carefully. One wrong move could provoke them or attract predators from nearby. She knelt slowly and murmured softly, "It's okay, sleep." Her voice was calm, low, and soothing. She had no idea if it would work, but instinct told her that predators, even alien ones, could respond to gentle tones if they were in extreme fear. At first, the cubs froze, their little bodies stiff and alert. Then, one by one, they inched closer, drawn to the strange calmness in her voice. One brave cub nuzzled her hand, sniffing cautiously, and the others followed. Soon, they were crawling over her arms and shoulders, wrapping themselves around her as if she were a safe branch in a storm. Kayla marveled at the trust these wild creatures showed her. Their warmth pressed against her skin, and she could feel their small, rapid heartbeats. Despite their sharp teeth and claws, they were fragile, innocent in a way that humans rarely saw. She realized that the forest around them was not just dangerous, it was a world full of life trying to survive in ways humans could barely understand. The night deepened. Strange glowing insects flitted through the air, brushing against Kayla's face and hair. Distant roars echoed through the massive trees, and she realized the adult predators might be nearby, hunting or patrolling their territory. Kayla held her breath as she sensed movement among the shadows. The cubs stirred nervously, pressing closer to her. She whispered again, "Sleep," and to her relief they calmed, their bodies melting against hers in a peaceful bundle. Kayla knew she couldn't stay still for long. She needed to find shelter before the larger predators discovered her presence. But moving with a dozen tiny nervous cubs was tricky. Every step had to be careful, slow, and silent. She scanned the forest and spotted a hollowed tree trunk that was just wide enough for her and the cubs. Its interior was smooth and dry, protected from the faint drizzle that had started falling. Carefully, she lifted the cubs one by one, murmuring softly, and guided them into the hollow. They curled up together, eyes slowly closing, trusting her completely. Kayla stayed outside, leaning against the trunk, listening to the forest. As she watched, she began noticing the cubs' personalities. One was bold, always the first to explore and the first to approach her. Another was shy, hiding under her arms, peeking out with wide, fearful eyes. A third was mischievous, batting at glowing insects and making soft growls of frustration when it failed to catch them. Even in such a dangerous place, life persisted, full of unique traits and small quirks. Kayla felt a strange sense of pride and responsibility. She was no longer just an observer. She was a protector. Hours passed. The forest noises continued, eerie and beautiful, and Kayla felt a mix of fear and fascination. She realized that every sound, every flicker of light could mean danger or opportunity. Survival on this planet would not come from weapons alone. It would come from understanding, patience, and the ability to connect with life in ways humans rarely imagined. The cubs had shown her that trust could bridge species, that calmness could be stronger than fear, and that even in the most alien hostile environment, hope could grow. As she finally allowed herself a moment of rest, the cubs curled tightly against her, their small bodies rising and falling with quiet breaths. Kayla murmured softly again, "Sleep," and for the first time that night she felt a fragile, precious peace. The forest was still alive around them, dangerous and mysterious, but for now, in the glow of the twin moons and the protective embrace of the cubs, Kayla felt she had found a small sanctuary in the heart of a wild, untamed world. Kayla woke to the soft rustle of leaves and the faint glow of the twin moons filtering through the alien canopy. The cubs were still asleep, curled against her in a warm, tangled mass. She could feel their tiny bodies shifting, their breaths quick and shallow. For a moment she simply lay there, watching them, marveling at how fragile and yet alive they were. She had never expected to feel such connection with creatures so wild, so different from humans. The forest outside hummed with life, strange and foreign, but inside her hollowed tree trunk, there was a fragile peace. As the morning light grew stronger, the cubs began to stir. One, the boldest of the group, stretched its small limbs and climbed over Kayla's arm, sniffing her face curiously. She laughed softly, careful not to startle them. "Good morning," she whispered. "Let's get ready for the day." The cubs seemed to understand her tone more than her words, nuzzling closer for comfort. She had spoken softly to them all night, repeating the word "sleep," and it was remarkable how they responded, almost like tiny loyal children. Kayla knew she had to move carefully. She couldn't stay in the same place for long. The forest was too dangerous and the adult predators might be near. She decided to explore, learn more about the cubs' habits, and see if there was a safer place to stay. One by one she lifted the cubs, murmuring calm words, and led them out of the hollow. The forest felt different in daylight, less threatening, but still full of alien shapes and movements that kept her alert. She noticed how the cubs began to mirror her movements. When she crouched low to avoid a thorned vine, they crouched too. When she stopped suddenly, their ears flicked and their eyes followed her every motion. As they moved, Kayla began observing the cubs more closely. Each had its own personality. The bold one, now leading the small group, seemed fearless, testing the terrain, sniffing the air, and occasionally letting out a soft, playful growl. The shy one clung to her side, hesitant to explore but always trusting Kayla's guidance. The mischievous one tried to pounce on leaves and insects, only to trip and tumble, then shake itself off and try again. Kayla smiled at their antics. In a world so dangerous, these small signs of personality made them real, made them alive in a way that could inspire hope. By midday, Kayla found a small clearing with a crystal-clear stream. The water reflected the glowing leaves above and made the cubs' fur shine. She let them drink first, watching carefully as they lapped the water with small, delicate tongues. She knelt by the edge, cupping her hands to drink herself, and noticed how the cubs were not afraid of her. They approached her slowly, sniffing her hands, then retreating when she touched them gently. The bond was growing stronger. It was not just about survival anymore, it was about trust, understanding, and care. Kayla decided to teach them some simple behaviors to help them survive. She showed the bold one how to use its claws to gently dig for insects hiding under moss. She guided the shy one, coaxing it to climb small rocks and jump over fallen branches. The mischievous cub, of course, ignored instructions and chased the glowing insects, but Kayla laughed, realizing that patience was part of the process. She murmured the word, "sleep," again when they seemed restless, and they paused, listening to her voice, waiting for her guidance. The power of her calmness amazed her. These predators, even so young, were already learning from her presence, responding not to commands, but to the feeling she carried. As the sun began to dip, Kayla realized that surviving in this forest would require more than food and safety. It would require forming a true bond with the cubs. She needed to understand their instincts, their fears, their ways of communicating. She started noticing small things. A flick of a tail meant curiosity, a low growl meant unease, a soft nuzzle meant trust. Each signal was a language, and Kayla was learning to speak it, not with words but with patience, calmness, and care. That night, Kayla built a slightly larger shelter using fallen branches and vines, careful to create a space where all the cubs could curl up safely. She whispered softly to them, and one by one, they nestled against her, their tiny bodies warm and reassuring. She traced her hand over their fur, feeling the rhythm of their small heartbeats. The forest outside was alive with predators, unknown threats, and strange, glowing creatures. But inside this small space, there was a fragile, growing family. Over the next few days, Kayla noticed the cubs following her almost everywhere. They would trail behind when she explored, occasionally running ahead to investigate and then rushing back when they saw her. They started mimicking some of her gestures, crouching, pausing, and even making soft, curious sounds when she spoke. Kayla felt a strange pride. These were wild creatures, predators of their planet, yet they were responding to her with trust and loyalty. She realized that humans had a power beyond tools and weapons. The power to connect, to nurture, and to teach even the fiercest of beings to accept care and guidance. One evening, as the twin moons rose and bathed the forest in soft silver light, Kayla watched the cubs play. They tumbled over moss, chased shadows, and occasionally paused to check on her. She murmured, "Sleep," gently, and the cubs paused, then curled together, resting near her. She felt an overwhelming sense of connection and responsibility. The bond she had formed was not just emotional, it was survival. By understanding them, guiding them, and protecting them, she was giving them a chance to grow, and in turn they were teaching her about trust, patience, and the strange, delicate beauty of life in the wild. As she finally allowed herself a moment of rest, Kayla whispered softly, "Good night, my little ones." The cubs stirred, nuzzled her one last time, then settled against her, their tiny breaths slow and steady. The forest hummed around them, full of unknown dangers and alien sounds, but inside their small shelter there was warmth, safety, and the beginning of a bond that would shape all of their lives. Kayla knew that the coming days would be filled with challenges, but with the trust and loyalty of the cubs, she felt a confidence she had never known before. In this alien world, a human and a dozen predator cubs had found a connection that could survive anything. Kayla had grown used to the rhythm of the forest, moving carefully with the cubs at her side. The days had been quiet, filled with learning, teaching, and observing the small predators' behavior. She knew the forest was dangerous, but the cubs seemed to trust her completely, and that gave her courage. Today she led them toward a small ridge she had spotted earlier, hoping to get a better view of the surrounding area. The cubs followed eagerly, their tiny paws barely making a sound on the glowing moss. As they climbed, Kayla felt a strange vibration in the air, subtle but distinct. The cubs stiffened instantly, ears flicking, eyes wide. Kayla froze, scanning the dense forest below. There were footprints, large, fresh, and unlike anything she had seen before. She crouched low, instinctively pulling the cubs close. Her heart pounded as she realized what she was seeing. Adult predators, massive and sleek, moving through the forest, clearly hunting. Their claws had cut deep grooves into the moss, and the faint glint of sharp teeth reflected the fading sunlight. Kayla whispered softly, "Stay close, stay quiet." The cubs pressed against her, their small bodies trembling slightly. She knew they were aware of the danger, their instincts screaming at them to run, hide, or fight. But her calm voice seemed to give them some reassurance. Slowly she guided them to a small hollow beneath a rock ledge. It was barely large enough to hide them, but it offered cover. She peeked over the edge, watching as the adult predators prowled the area. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly intelligent. Kayla realized she had underestimated them. These were not mindless beasts, they were hunters and they were close. Time slowed as Kayla observed the predators. They paused occasionally, sniffing the air, their sharp eyes scanning for any sign of prey. The cubs shifted nervously, but Kayla held them still, murmuring the word, "Sleep." To her amazement, they obeyed, curling tightly against her body, their small forms almost invisible in the shadows. She realized that the power of her calm voice had a real effect. It could soothe, guide, and even protect. She had discovered a strange, fragile advantage. The cub's instincts combined with her guidance could create a shield, at least for a short time. The predators moved closer. Kayla could see the muscles under their sleek fur, the deadly curves of their claws, and the intelligent glint in their eyes. She knew that if they discovered the cubs, there would be no escape. Panic threatened to rise, but she forced herself to focus. Her survival, and the cubs, depended on strategy, not fear. Slowly she began looking for ways to distract the adults, using fallen leaves, glowing insects, and small rocks to create noise in another direction. The predators' ears twitched, their attention briefly drawn away, and Kayla exhaled silently. She realized that she could not just hide forever. The forest was too vast and the predators would keep searching. She needed a plan to move the cubs to safety. Carefully she whispered again, "Follow me slowly, stay close." The cubs obeyed instinctively, moving like a single silent unit as she led them through narrow paths she had memorized. Every step was calculated to avoid leaving traces that the adults could follow. Kayla's mind raced, thinking of ways humans had survived dangerous situations on other planets. She remembered camouflage techniques, silent movement strategies, and the importance of staying calm. Hours passed, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Kayla led the cubs to a hidden grove she had discovered earlier, filled with dense underbrush and small cliffs that offered natural protection. She allowed the cubs to explore, observing how they used their senses to understand the new space. They climbed, ran, and sniffed the area, their trust in her growing even stronger. Kayla smiled, feeling a mix of relief and pride. They had survived the first real danger together, and the bond between them was solidifying. But the danger was not over. Kayla noticed movement at the edge of the grove, large silhouettes slipping between the trees. The adult predators had followed her trail, persistent and intelligent. She held her breath, pulling the cubs closer. The predators stopped at the grove's edge, sniffing and growling softly. Kayla's heart raced. She whispered sleep as she had done before, but this time the cubs hesitated, sensing the looming threat. She pressed her hand against the boldest cub's back, murmuring softly, and slowly the cubs curled together, trusting her completely once again. Kayla knew she had to act quickly. Using her knowledge of the forest, she created small diversions, throwing rocks, snapping twigs, and using the glowing insects to distract the adult predators. Her movements were precise, calculated, each step designed to confuse and mislead. The predators hesitated, clearly frustrated and uncertain. Kayla realized that the combination of her intelligence and the cubs' instincts gave them an advantage. Together, they were not helpless prey, they were a team capable of outsmarting even the deadliest hunters of the forest. As night fell, the predators eventually retreated, unable to locate their target. Kayla breathed deeply, feeling both exhaustion and exhilaration. She had survived her first true encounter with the adult predators, and the cubs had followed her guidance without question. The bond they shared was no longer just emotional, it was a matter of survival. She knew that the forest would continue to challenge them, but she also knew that they had learned something essential: trust in each other, calm in the face of fear, and the ability to act together in moments of danger. Kayla settled the cubs into a small, safe corner of the grove, whispering sleep as they curled against her. She stroked their fur, feeling the rapid rise and fall of their tiny bodies. The forest around them was alive with unknown threats, distant howls, and the glowing pulse of alien life, but for now they were safe. The experience had taught her that survival was not just about strength, it was about connection, understanding, and courage. She had faced danger and emerged stronger, and so had the cubs. As she finally allowed herself to rest, Kayla looked up at the glowing canopy above. The forest was vast, mysterious, and deadly, but it was also beautiful and full of life. She realized that the coming days would be even more dangerous, and she would need to rely on her wits, the cubs' instincts, and the bond they had formed. In the heart of this alien world, a human and a dozen predator cubs had survived their first deadly encounter together, and the lessons of trust, calm, and ingenuity would guide them through the dangers yet to come. Kayla woke to the soft rustle of the alien forest, the twin moons fading as a faint light crept through the towering trees. The cubs were already stirring, stretching, and yawning, their small bodies pressed against her. She felt a surge of determination. The last encounter with the adult predators had shown her that survival here would require more than calm words. It would need careful planning, quick thinking, and a lot of ingenuity. She brushed herself off and scanned the grove. The dense underbrush offered some protection, but she knew they couldn't stay in one place forever. She gathered the cubs and whispered softly, "Follow me, stay close." They obeyed instinctively, moving like a single unit around her. Kayla had begun to understand their behavior. The bold one led the way, sniffing the ground and alerting them to any danger. The shy one stayed near her, cautious but willing to explore. The mischievous one tried to investigate everything from glowing fungi to small, scuttling creatures, but Kayla kept a gentle hand on its back, reminding it to stay close. She realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding predators, it was about learning the forest, using it, and thinking ahead. As they moved through the thick moss, Kayla noticed signs of the adult predators again: broken branches, deep scratches on tree trunks, and faint footprints. She knew they were persistent. She needed a plan. She began teaching the cubs small techniques to protect themselves. She showed the bold cub how to use shadows and undergrowth for hiding, how to move quietly without leaving obvious traces. She encouraged the mischievous one to create small noises in another direction, confusing predators. Slowly, the cubs began imitating her movements, crouching low, pausing, and blending into the forest. Kayla also had to find food and water. She led them to a crystal-clear stream, showing the cubs how to lap water carefully and avoid drawing attention. She pointed out edible fruits and small harmless creatures they could try to catch. The cubs were fast learners. The bold one caught a small insect, showing it to the others. Kayla praised them softly, feeling a strange pride. She realized that human ingenuity wasn't just about tools and weapons. It was about observation, problem-solving, and teaching others to survive. The cubs were beginning to understand her lessons, responding not to commands but to her presence, guidance, and calm voice. The night came quickly. Shadows stretched long and strange glowing creatures moved in the underbrush. Kayla knew the predators could return at any moment. She built a small protective barrier using fallen branches and rocks, creating a space where the cubs could rest safely. She whispered "sleep" to them, and one by one they curled against her, their small bodies pressing close for warmth and security. She felt a strange sense of satisfaction. They had survived another day not by strength alone, but by trust, strategy, and careful planning. Suddenly a noise made Kayla freeze. Something large moved in the shadows, an adult predator. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the moonlight. The cubs stiffened, ears twitching. Kayla whispered urgently, "Stay calm, stay together." The cubs pressed against her, and she realized that they were ready to act as a team. She picked up a few glowing stones and tossed them carefully in the opposite direction. The predator paused, distracted by the faint light and movement. Kayla used the moment to lead the cubs to a narrow path she had noticed earlier, one that would take them through dense foliage and away from danger. As they moved, Kayla noticed how the cubs had started to respond to subtle cues. The bold one signaled with a flick of its tail when danger was near. The shy one sniffed the air, alerting her to the presence of other creatures. The mischievous one made small sounds that unintentionally drew predators away. Kayla smiled. Together they were becoming a small, clever team. Survival was no longer just about hiding, it was about using the cubs' instincts, her knowledge of the forest, and quick thinking to outsmart their enemies. Hours passed as they moved carefully through the forest. Kayla led them to a hidden grove she had discovered earlier, one protected by thick vines and high rocks. She let the cubs explore, climbing and playing, but always keeping them close. She whispered softly, "Sleep," and they curled together, exhausted but safe. Kayla finally allowed herself a moment of rest, leaning against a rock and listening to the forest. She realized that the forest was alive with challenges, but she was learning how to use every element to her advantage. The light, the shadows, the terrain, and even the cubs themselves. Over the next few days, Kayla and the cubs developed a routine. She taught them to recognize danger, use camouflage, and work together. The cubs became more confident, more aware, and more responsive to her guidance. Kayla marveled at how intelligent they were, how quickly they adapted. She realized that humans had a unique advantage. Not the sharpest teeth or the fastest claws, but the ability to think, plan, and connect with others. The bond she had formed with the cubs was not just emotional, it was survival. Their trust allowed her to teach them, guide them, and protect them, and their instincts and loyalty amplified her efforts. One night, Kayla spotted faint lights in the distance. She crouched low, observing carefully. The adult predators were moving again, searching for prey. She knew that this would be their biggest challenge yet. But she also knew that they had learned to work together. She whispered softly to the cubs and they pressed against her, ready. Kayla smiled. They were no longer helpless. They were a team using strategy, ingenuity, and trust to survive in the alien forest. As the twin moons rose high, casting silver light across the trees, Kayla guided the cubs to a safe resting spot, building a small shelter of rocks and vines. She whispered, "Sleep," gently, and they curled against her, their breath steady. The forest hummed with life, some of it dangerous, some beautiful, but Kayla felt a deep confidence. She had survived and so had the cubs. Together they had proven that survival in this alien world required not just strength, but intelligence, patience, and a bond that could overcome fear. Kayla finally lay down, the cubs pressing against her, and let herself close her eyes for a brief moment. The forest around them was alive, unpredictable, and dangerous, but for the first time she felt truly prepared. She had learned to use her mind, her voice, and the cubs' instincts as tools. The lessons of trust, calmness, and cleverness would guide them through the challenges yet to come. In this alien world, a human and a dozen predator cubs were not just surviving, they were thriving, becoming a force that could face even the deadliest threats together. The first light of dawn crept over the forest, painting the towering trees with soft silver and gold. Kayla stretched and felt the cubs shift around her, stirring from their sleep. Over the past days they had grown stronger, braver, and more confident under her guidance. Each had developed its own personality, and each had learned to trust her completely. She looked at them with a mixture of pride and affection. They were no longer just predator cubs, they were her family. Kayla led them out of the hidden grove, moving slowly and carefully. The forest was alive with morning sounds, chirps, rustles, and the distant calls of larger predators. But the cubs moved confidently beside her now, alert and aware. They had learned the forest's secrets, the hidden paths, and the safe places to hide. Kayla had taught them to respond to her voice, her gestures, and even the slightest shift in her expression. Together they were a small, clever team. As they walked, Kayla noticed fresh tracks. Adult predators were nearby again, but this time the cubs were ready. The bold one signaled with a low growl, and the others stiffened. Kayla whispered calmly, "Follow me, stay close." They obeyed instantly, moving as one unit. Using the lessons she had taught them, they ducked into shadows, avoided open paths, and even created diversions with small rocks and sticks. Kayla realized that they were no longer helpless prey, they were clever survivors, guided by her and strengthened by the bond they shared. Hours later, they reached a wide clearing surrounded by towering cliffs and thick foliage. It was a safe place, protected from most predators. Kayla let the cubs explore freely. They ran, tumbled, and chased each other, laughing in small, soft growls that made her smile. The mischievous one pounced on a glowing insect, while the shy one cautiously sniffed around a fallen log. The bold one climbed a small rock to get a better view of the clearing. Kayla watched them with wonder. These predators, once helpless and fearful, were now confident and alive, thriving in the alien forest with her guidance. Kayla knew that the forest would always have dangers, but she had taught the cubs to adapt, survive, and trust her. She sat down on a rock, murmuring softly, "Sleep," and the cubs slowly gathered around her, curling against her for warmth. She traced her hand over their fur, feeling the steady rhythm of their small hearts. She realized that this bond went deeper than survival. It was a connection of trust, loyalty, and care, a family born not of blood but of choice and love. The sun began to set, painting the sky with orange and purple streaks. Kayla decided it was time to make a more permanent shelter. She guided the cubs to a small cave hidden behind thick vines and rocks. Inside, she cleared space for them to sleep safely and created small nooks for each cub. They explored curiously, sniffing every corner, and then settled down, pressing close to her. Kayla whispered softly, "Good night," and watched as their eyes closed, the soft rise and fall of their tiny bodies giving her a sense of peace she had never known. Days passed, and Kayla and the cubs established a rhythm. She taught them how to find water, recognize edible plants, and avoid dangerous creatures. The cubs became more independent but always returned to her side, showing their loyalty and trust. Kayla began to notice how they communicated with each other, soft growls, nuzzles, and quick gestures that showed intelligence far beyond what she had expected. They were learning from her, and she was learning from them. The forest was no longer just a place of danger, it was a home, a place where life thrived through connection, patience, and care. One evening, Kayla noticed distant lights flickering between the trees. She froze, sensing the presence of adult predators. But this time she did not panic. The cubs were ready. The bold one signaled a warning, and the others immediately huddled close to her. Kayla whispered calmly, "Stay together." Using the skills they had learned, the cubs followed her carefully through hidden paths, avoiding the glowing eyes of predators in the darkness. They moved silently, efficiently, and as a unit. Kayla realized that the bond they shared was more than emotional, it was survival, strategy, and teamwork. As the predators moved away, frustrated by the clever maneuvers, Kayla and the cubs reached the safety of their cave. She let them rest, murmuring softly, "Sleep." The cubs curled tightly around her, trusting her completely. Kayla looked at them and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only saved them, but she had also given them a chance to thrive in a dangerous world. They had become more than a human's responsibility, they were partners, friends, and family. Over the next weeks, Kayla and the cubs continued to explore the forest, learning more about its secrets. The cubs had grown stronger, faster, and more aware of their surroundings. Kayla had taught them to hunt small creatures, use natural camouflage, and rely on their instincts while also listening to her guidance. She had also learned from them. Their patience, their cunning, and their ability to read the forest had sharpened her own skills. Together, they were a force capable of surviving almost anything. One quiet night, Kayla sat at the entrance of the cave, the cubs resting peacefully beside her. The twin moons reflected in their wide, trusting eyes. She whispered softly, "We are safe. We are together." The cubs nuzzled her in response, a small sign of their bond. She realized that in this vast alien forest, she had created a family that could survive, thrive, and face any danger. They had found strength in each other, and the bond they shared would guide them through whatever challenges the forest might throw their way. Kayla smiled, feeling the warmth of the cubs pressed against her. The forest was alive, full of unknown creatures and dangers, but she no longer felt fear alone. She had found companionship, loyalty, and love in the most unlikely of places. The cubs had changed her life and she had changed theirs. In this alien world, a human and a dozen predator cubs had formed a new family, one that would endure, grow, and face the future together. As the night deepened, Kayla whispered softly one last time, "Sleep," and the cubs closed their eyes, calm and content. The forest hummed around them, dangerous and beautiful, but inside their small cave there was warmth, safety, and the beginning of a bond that would last a lifetime. Kayla knew that this was just the beginning of their journey, but with trust, patience, and love, they could face anything together. The forest was theirs, the cubs were hers, and she was theirs, a new family in a wild alien world.